Hello, everyone. Sloan here with the kind of conversation you're not going to hear anywhere else. Our guest in this episode is Sandy Rich, the Executive Director of the New York City Board of Education Retirement System, which is affectionately known by those in the know as BERS. Longtime listeners know that I've been less than charitable to the New York City pension system on this podcast, so we started by giving him a chance to clear the air. We then stepped back a bit to learn more about the organization, the steps Sandy and his team have taken towards achieving operational alpha, and why there is no substitute for a solid asset liability management study. That conversation starts about 17 minutes into this episode. But don't skip the banter. That would be weird. Ashby and I talk about how the latest advancements in AI-generated art may shape our social imagination, in addition to the future of the Free Money Podcast merch store. And then we finished out the podcast by talking about the hard things in our lives, taking questions from listeners, and, as always, giving you an honest-to-God gardening tip. If you'd like to ask a question in an upcoming episode, please write to us. The email is freemoneypod@gmail.com. And if you wouldn't like to ask a question, but you're feeling friendly, fun, and charitable, go ahead and leave us a review in your podcast store of choice. It helps other people find the show and is a nice way to manifest some positive vibes. And before I kick things over to everyone's favorite disclosure pirate, this episode of the Free Money Podcast is brought to you by our friends at Cordatius, who are experienced doulas to investment offices navigating digital transformation. Cordatius focuses on your data so you can focus on alpha. For more info, visit cordatiusllc.com. And with that, take it away, Sharkbait.
Ahoy, Free Money Podcast listeners! I'm Sharkbait Buckley, the Disclosure Pirate, and I'm here to set ye straight about what's going on with this here show. Sloan Ortel works for Invest Vegan LLC, a New York registered investment advisor. Ashby Monk works for Stanford University, Adapar, Future Proof, Long Game, and various startups. All opinions expressed by either Sloan or Ashby are entirely their own, and do not reflect the opinions of their crew or any company. Clients who invest vegan may maintain positions in securities and strategies discussed in this podcast. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where Invest Vegan and its representatives are properly licensed or exempted, and a client agreement has been executed. Arr!
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money. Money, money, money.
Welcome to the Free Money Podcast, where we routinely struggle not to use all of our best jokes on each other before we start recording
We
the
do.
show.
We were cracking each other up, and I was like, let's start this thing. We're going to run out.
I know.
Jokes are
I know.
a finite resource. I don't have
They
that
are.
many.
I have a lot today because I have been playing around with these new AI image generation tools. I'm sure that you've played with these.
Is this the doll E?
So I've been using Midjourney, but basically same deal.
Okay, and can
so
anybody access the Midjourney?
Yeah. At this point, you can basically sign up. There's also Stable Diffusion, which if you have a Python environment on your desktop, you can just run. It's open source.
This is a great tip.
It'll do the stuff for you. It is. I would say it's kind of like learning to play a new instrument. And the obvious application for me, of this all is let's make some brand assets for the Free Money Podcast.
For sure.
Right. So I was like, okay, so how do I convey the fullness of what it is that we do?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, all right, so show me, a lock that is opening up and, emitting a torrent of liberated, enlightened cash into a better world or whatever. And, it's sort of like typing that into Google.
Right. Yeah, you get some very random outcomes.
Some of it's really cool, but it's it really, I think, is a unique opportunity to reckon with an alien consciousness, because you just type stuff, you have a concept in your head as you type it, and then the AI spits back its concept of what you said.
I got to go play with that. I'd love to see how it thinks about long-termism and long-term investing and things like that.
Oh man, yeah, it's really funny. The stuff that it's really Midjourney in particular is really good at is anything with a an aspect of ethereality.
Yeah.
So if you were to sort of think about either like kind of those 5-cent paperback fantasy novel illustrations, where you have like a sweet babe who's like in metal armor holding a sword or whatever on top of a throne.
Yeah.
Like it can do that all day long. It's obviously like what we got to do is render us as like that type of character and like make a whole brand around that using the AI. But I think that tech is a little bit far off.
I can picture us with swords taking on, on horseback, taking on the bad guys of Wall Street.
Yeah,
We can
yeah.
put
Like
we can put some visualization
that's a
behind that logic.
that's a good image. Yeah, I think this will be a nice the hunt for a new logo.
Yes. Well, before we get into the news, it is, and I have to.
yeah.
I'm just like, I feel the stress leaving my body as I say these words. It is a long weekend coming up.
Oh, baby.
I actually have tomorrow off and Monday off, and I'm gonna go to the beach. And we've got a little opportunity. I'm gonna do some boarding of the boogie variety, not the coolest of the boards. Okay, we're all nobody looks cool walking down to the beach with the boogie board under the arm.
But you get to get wrecked again and again by the waves. Like that's like the most fun part of the beach.
It's the best. So we've got a few boogie boards. Yep, I'm really excited. Do you have any plans for the weekend?
Yeah, I am going up to the Catskills to hang out. We're gonna, we got some vegan grilling cheese, which is, a new concept for me. But my partner and I are we're just gonna hang out, and maybe look at some stars, smell some trees. I should add that we're taping this before Labor Day weekend, and it'll probably be released after Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, I know. I always wonder if we should orient people to the actual dates. We should just talk generically about life. But no, it's freaking day before Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, well, like one of the good hacks about like our timely news is that so many of our stories are so slow moving that like literally if you went back and like listened to the news from like a year and a half ago, you'd be like, oh wow, okay, that's like pretty interesting.
It's true. Speaking of the news, I have 3 items.
News. The magic number.
We might need a news jingle. I feel like
a news jingle.
Bum 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 bum. Who has the best jingles is the BBC. I can remember living in Europe and hearing as the BBC was changing programs, it's like this real groovy, like digitized, just you wanted to hang out. It kept you watching. You didn't even care. Anywho, first bit of news coming to us from Israel. The Israel Citizens Fund, which may still hold the mantle as the youngest sovereign wealth fund on the planet. Maybe.
Whoa.
Well, it was established in 2014, so maybe you'd call that its birthday, but it got going in June of this year. And it got going with about 250 million bucks. But the news is that it just doubled in size. At the end of August. It's up to 500 million assets under management just over the summer. This fund is growing like hotcakes. Is that something that grows?
What are they doing with all that money?
I don't know if hotcakes grow. But anyway, what grows? What's the analogy?
Like a plant of some kind?
Like an Australian tree. That's some gardening knowledge there for you. Those Australian trees grow way too fast. Just look it up. Anyway, so they've got significant inflows. Just as a reminder, it's called the Citizens Fund, but it's a natural gas fund. And so it must have something to do with the price of natural gas in the world, which I didn't look up.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, this price of natural gas is rather on an upswing recently. Rather.
Beautiful. Very good. So second bit of news, coming a little closer to home and positive related to sustainability, is from CalSTRS. CalSTRS announced that they are shifting 20% of their public equities book, representing just a little bit, $27 billion, into a low-carbon passive index. Specifically, I think it's the MSCI ACWI low carbon. So the crabby skeptics out there will note that that means 80% of the public equity portfolio is in non-low carbon. But I'm not crabby or a skeptic. I'm very positive on the move. I think you got to start somewhere. These crabby skeptics are, but good for them. You know, in a moment where you'll see in the next news item, there's a lot of pushback on plans from integrating their ESG into their decision making. CalSTRS is continuing to move forward on the sustainability agenda, which to me seems very sensible. This is a de-risking element to this passive portfolio, and why not get hydrocarbons, minimized?
Yeah, and it's also, I think, sensible not to just jump in with both feet if you're a pool of that size. I mean, shout out to Free Money alumnus, Kirsty Jenkinson, who's over there doing stuff.
I think she probably had a hand in this. That's my guess.
In doing something related to ESG, I would be shocked to hear that.
Yep. Yep.
But yeah, like that. I mean, a lot of these companies are not the most liquid necessarily, or I think that it makes sense to kind of put in 27 billion at a time instead of putting in the whole.
Yeah, they're dollar cost averaging 27 billion into the sustainability. Yeah, that's a lot, but when you think about the other plans out there, 20%, if everybody did 20%, it would be a huge signal to the market that pensions were pricing this risk more aggressively. And we would see companies shift. It would be like this monumental thing where capital gets allocated differently and managers respond and then companies respond. So maybe this will have a bigger impact.
I mean, I do think that it's already having a bigger impact in the sense of there are a lot of of fund managers spinning up thematic quote unquote investment strategies that are designed to focus.
That's true. That is actually a good point. And you can't underestimate how big of a role model these CalSTRS, CalPERS, big pension plans are for the others. Because even if you think they're bureaucratic or whatever you think, they definitely are abiding by fiduciary standards. And so there's a lot of people, and people forget that in CalPERS, there was that election for one of the board members, special election, where it was about rejecting ESG. So it's not like we're sitting here in California and it's like the ultimate hippie pension plans. These are very sophisticated fiduciary bound organizations. And so if CalSTRS is able to get out there and do 20%, so can you. And
that's a great point.
And then all of a sudden the entire industry's got 20% and maybe we're saved as a planet.
That's actually, I think there's a pretty interesting paper in there, right? You can use CalSTRS governance things as almost like an index.
Yeah.
It's if you're an institution, it's no matter how much stuff you have to deal with, it's not as bad as the California plans. And if they can do it.
Yeah. When I'm not recording my words to be preserved for all time and easily accessed, I often talk about how challenging that governance environment is. It's not the most laudatory is the way. Yeah, I'm not praising the organization for its easy governance. And so if they can do it, you can do it.
I react to alumni of there very similarly to the way that I react to people who've been in the Peace Corps or something working, cleaning up beaches.
No, it's
something like that.
It has been service. I think a lot of us are starting to fight to get them more money, to make it, a really attractive environment for people to want to go work at. Not just to build experience and serve your state, but also maybe to get paid. It's like we can't ask people to do service forever. People don't stay in the Peace Corps forever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All right.
But you like it. It's good. Anyway.
Last bit of news. We got to tick off the other big bit of news, ESG related, is the other side of that coin we were just talking about, with the positive outcome being CalSTRS deploying into sustainability. Texas, the head of ESG has resigned. I don't know why, Sloan. Any idea why the head of ESG would resign from Texas teachers?
I mean, I feel probably it's because they're, afraid of really taking a stand, dressing up in a suit of armor and just going to town in the office for what they stand for,
That's one for our art program, AI art program. Show me a head of ESG wearing armor in the office. Yeah. So for those that didn't catch our last episode, I think I actually talked about this on the last episode.
I think you did. I think you did.
Texas has created their own version of woke. Is basically instead of going left, they go as far right as they can. The politicians are wading in and saying who is investable. So they are defining what the pension plan is allowed to invest on based on politics. It just so happens these politics are defining a bunch of asset managers as, too left-leaning and pushing back on ESG and pushing the organization to continue investing in fossil fuels. And so I just thought it was interesting to see the head of ESG quit after 5 years.
I mean, would you want to be involved with that? I mean, let someone else deal with that situation.
But it's interesting because Texas Teachers is one of the most sophisticated professional investment organizations. And so I think probably even the right-leaning folks inside that organization are frustrated with the politicization. That's my guess. I haven't talked to anybody.
I would just imagine so. I mean, like if you think about being an investor, right? The last thing you want, like you've done all this stuff, hopefully you have some resources. The last thing you want is an uninformed bystander drawing the lines about acceptability.
Yeah, and telling you what to divest and what to do. I mean, this is the same thing. The same CIOs have been pushing back on the left for a very long time to say, don't tell us what to do. And then people like me are like trying to make the case for these CIOs to include all of the sustainability issues, ESG issues, but from a value and financial performance perspective over a long duration. Yeah, that's a hard thing to do though, right? You really need to build out sophisticated ESG toolkit. You need all these different things. And so you need to invest in the integration of ESG. And unfortunately in this moment, big chunk of the country is saying we don't even want to invest in it. We want to get rid of it. So
fortunately, we have an allocator on the line who's
Holy
from
cow.
New York, the opposite of Texas.
And California in its own way.
Yeah, sure. We've got
I mean, that's
Sandy
why
Rich
we're here together. Bay Area, Bay Bridge consensus.
Oh my!
There he is. Sandy.
Look at this guy.
How you doing, Sloan?
Doing pretty good.
And Professor Ashby, it's good
to see you, Sandy Rich. Wonderful to have you on the program. Welcome to the Free Money Podcast. Are you going to free some money for us today?
Not my money.
Oh, no. Are you bound by some of these fiduciary standards we were just talking about?
Yeah, I've got a few of those things hounding me, yes.
Well, I mean, like, I think maybe a place to start is, I think, we got lunch the other day, and you were pretty quick to point out that we haven't been the nicest to the New York City pension system.
Well, I was catching up on all your old podcasts, and you weren't very nice to New York City retirement systems. But I would add, I'm not saying you were wrong.
Okay.
there is a distinction between being nice and being incorrect.
True.
And,
I think in that case,
we have our issues.
We might have been pointing out the number of board members and the amount of board meetings that go on, and pointing towards the established research that shows a board meeting every month to 50 trustees is a lot. But anyway, that might be a little bit of hyperbole. Can't remember if that's exactly how many there are, but anyway.
You're underestimating, actually.
Oh, no! Yeah, so that's not best practice, governance.
My coworkers are literal cats, and I'm willing to wager that our meetings go a little bit more orderly than some of those do. But I'm curious, maybe to orient our listeners, can you kind of give us a sense of who your beneficiaries are, what BERS is, how it fits into the broader New York City system, and indeed what the broader New York City system is?
Sure. So New York City is constituted by 5 independent systems. Police, which was the first one created about 120 years ago. Wow. Fire, Teachers Retirement Service system, New York City Employee Retirement System, and then Board of Ed Retirement System. That's ours, BERS, Board of Ed Retirement System. We were 100 years old last August.
Wow.
we are the smallest of the five. We constitute about 8.5 billion of the 250 billion. Well, maybe a little less today. We are all, our members are all the non-pedagogue employees of the Department of Education in New York City. And we do have some unique features that are related to our creation. We were actually created under state education law, so we're actually slightly different than the other four systems in that they are city agencies. We're not a city agency legally,
Okay.
although we do act like
100 years, that's a long time. Was it always a pre-funded defined benefit plan, or has it I know that this is off script a little bit, but I'm just curious, what was the original asset base made up of?
Yeah, it was always a defined benefit plan. It was always, well, I don't know this specifically, but as far back as I can tell, it was always governed with the requirement that any actuarially determined contribution calculated by the independent office of the actuary in New York, and that office is independent, must be funded under the New York City budget.
Gotcha.
So apart from the oddities of the member back and forths like disability claims and retirement flows and things like that, the funds coming from the city are consistent and they are required. And last year they were about 11% of the city budget, about I would say 10.5 billion of a $98 billion budget, and a little bit less than 11% this coming year.
Okay.
And that's for all of the pensions, right? Not just
That's for all the pension systems. Ours is a small component. I think we got $230 million in contributions from the city last fiscal year, and about 60 million in contributions from members who, as of tier 6, have to contribute between 3 and 6% of their income to the system.
And where are you sitting right now? Like, are you in New York City right now, or do you guys sit outside of the city?
I'm actually standing.
I thought you were.
But I am at 55 Water Street.
Oh, okay, right there. Okay, perfect.
Yeah. It's we have great new offices. We moved. Actually, we were supposed to move on March 2020. So
that was good timing.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, well, so.
Tough. I think we all moved March 2020, but back into our basement.
Not necessarily where we expected to land, though.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, look, I part of the reason I want to understand where you're sitting is you guys have been focused on operational alpha, and I think some of the things we've connected over the years is on technology and process and a bunch of different research projects that we're doing at Stanford. And related to the digitization of investment management. And so I'd just love to hear from you if you're experiencing any kind of upticks, what we might describe as operational alpha from those investments, and how do you know?
Yeah. So what I would characterize our efforts as having been driven by what we perceive to be shortcomings of the governance and execution in New York City's retirement systems writ large. We attack this. We're attacking this on many levels because we have installed a new operations ERP system. We are installing new fiscal accounting, record keeping and reporting. We have new, and where the most significant transitions are actually in our investment office, which we stood up in 2018. We created an investment strategy office in the Board of Ed retirement system that to a certain extent duplicates some of the things that the Office of New York City Controller and the Bureau of Asset Management provides to us.
Okay.
But in our view, we are far more efficient administratively and far more technologized, to use a term I've read about in a book that I have used and shared with others. We did this with the help of one of your sponsors. Ken Akundi was our consultant for Cadadis. He spent a lot of time with us and my director of investment strategy, Antonio Rodriguez. We've built a team around the systems, and what I think I can tell you definitively is we understand much better what we own. we have that information faster. We can process new investments more efficiently and at speed compared to New York City. I mean, New York City could take 3 years between a resolution or a recommendation from the city to make an investment and the final close of that investment. Which, if you're, I mean, I was a investment banker and portfolio manager. That concept alone is chilling.
Yeah.
Except for the fact that sometimes not being efficient is good when you're not particularly brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember Norway coming through the financial crisis, taking way too long to rebalance to 60% equities from 60% bonds, and then buying in at the bottom of the market.
Exactly.
And everybody's like, "Whoa, what did you guys do?" And it was like, "We're dysfunctional." But in a lucky way.
If you understand your weaknesses, and you can hopefully make them work for you.
Yeah.
So, we think of ourselves as a perpetuity, and we try not to make any rash moves.
Right.
Mostly because we can't.
But it's fun to hear you talk about the trade-off between technology and governance, because we have, in some of the research we do at Stanford, we have 3 levers that pension funds can pull on to improve their outcomes. One is governance, one is culture, and one is technology. And we spend a lot of time trying to solve the governance and the culture piece without really thinking as much about the technology. But in hearing you talk, it's almost like you've picked up on that and you're pulling hard on the technology lever, which in my experience will actually help you improve the governance and the culture over time because you've got better data.
That may be optimistic on the governance side. On the culture side, I can tell you it definitely helps a lot. We have far better relationships with our trustees. They understand more what we do, what we recommend, why we recommend it. And in terms of culture, we have a problem hiring people. I mean, it's very difficult. You've talked about it on the podcast, right? We operate within the system of employment in New York City. So, I can't hire really highly experienced people who actually have proven they can do what they say they can do. I hire a couple of key individuals who I can pay better, and then I backfill with young people.
Yeah.
And we view ourselves as kind of an engine of training for young people to work for us for 2 or 3 years, get a reputation, and move on into the investment industry. And we've already lost 2 of our hires over the last 4 years into really excellent career positions elsewhere, either at New York Common or into a venture capital fund. So we kind of view it as it's a weakness, but play around the weakness and get whatever leverage you can from it. And so we have a team of 7 in investment strategy, and they're almost all of them are very young and
that's awesome. Learning
aggressively, and technology dramatically supports that by relieving them of a lot of administrative burden.
That makes so much sense. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about the flow through on the cultural side of focusing on kind of your organization's innate qualities like this, right? Because like one of the things that really stands out to me is that from looking at the way that y'all have operated and the constraints that y'all operate under, some of the things that look really sexy to other allocators like don't really get you that excited, right? I think that there's a cultural tradition of like really fighting hard to get space into like some hot allocator or whatever. Let's say hypothetically you were able to like allocate into the fabled like Renaissance Medallion Fund or something like that. How exciting would that be relative to like a really good asset liability model for you?
It doesn't move the needle enough for us, right? So it's the problem, right? So we're $8.4 billion. If we make a $50 million allocation to Sequoia or you name it, brilliant money manager, they could burn the money or triple it, and it really doesn't move the needle.
Yep.
Which is sad to say, right? I mean, then what are we doing? But you're pointing to the asset liability studies. That's one of the disturbing things I found, and I was at the PBGC for a number of years, and before that a PM, right, and managing money for insurance companies as well as pension systems. And when I got here and I asked, oh, so let me see the asset liability study. Let me see the cash flows. Let me see and crickets. It was like really disturbing.
Really?
And so we did it. We cooperated with our actuary, Department of Actuaries, and our generalist consultant, Siegel Marco, and we did the first asset liability study of our system or any system in New York City. And one of the fascinating things we found was that, okay, we're going to see declining cash contributions. We went upside down 2 years ago. We're going to stay upside down, and cash flow is going to get tight by 2029, 2031, and contributions from the city may go to zero. Now, anyone making a commitment today to say the long-term strategy of one of the largest PE managers in New York City that we have a long-term relationship with, that's a commitment of almost 20 years of funding. And we might have to sell assets in 2032 to make our funding commitments.
Yeah.
Right. And so you have to be thinking about that, and then layer over some of the other complications, because, and we can talk about this later, but you talked about CalPERS using leverage. Nothing. We are 28% leveraged.
Wow. At the portfolio level, or this is baked
at the portfolio level.
Wow.
And this is a long conversation,
Yeah.
so we may have to talk about it some other time. But yes, we are 28% leveraged, and that it takes a little bit of detailed reading in our annual report, which I'd be happy to send to you. But we are leveraged.
Yeah.
So this is interesting, right? At the end of fiscal year 21, June 30, 21, we were 120% funded. The end of this past year, 6/30/22, 100% funded. How do you go from 120% funded to 100% funded? You're leveraged into a bad year.
Yes.
Yep.
I'll still take 100% funded, just to be clear. That's pretty much.
Yes, that's good.
Perfect.
We're very proud of that.
But so what you're talking about really leads us to this concept of smoothing. So we're seeing a lot of people in this downturn think hard about private markets and how they can leverage private equity to smooth the volatility in markets. But you're starting to raise issues looking out at 2029, 2030 of smoothing cash flows and facilitating this more holistic approach to building the portfolio. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about the cash flow side of things that you're doing around smoothing.
Right. Well, so the way we look at it, there are sources of limitations, right, or sources of risk, right? Among the, you got your equity allocations, and we're about 70-30 when you look at our portfolio on our macro basis. So we're leaning hard into equities because we're long-term investors. We have the liabilities, which are growing at about 6.5% a year, approximately, depending on what you think about employment in the city. And we're assuming an asset growth of 7%, right? But buried behind all those is another limiter, which is how is the cash flowing, right? What flows are coming in from PE investments we've made from previous allocations? What cash is coming in from some of our other foreign allocations? What is the breakup of international versus domestic, which I think I've asked a question about this, which hopefully you will answer for us in the future. And then it's the cash flows, right? Because you don't want to be stuck in 5 or 6 years, because you make very long-term commitments on some of these investments. You don't want to be stuck in the future having to sell down in a market environment you can't predict.
Totally.
Right? So you should be guiding your future, I would argue, more on those cash flows than anything else, if that is the limiting factor. I mean, for us, it is, because being 100% funded, being a perpetuity that we can lean into equities hard, I would argue cash flow is the ultimate limiter.
I agree.
And we don't have, I know you have governance issues, but the trick to New York City is there's a legislator sometime in the vast history requires the actuary to be independent, calculation to be governed, and the contribution to be made. So we don't have the problem of, say, Illinois, New Jersey, where there's a budget decision made after the actuarial calculation. They say, yeah, we know you need 10 billion, but we're going to give you 5.
Yeah.
So
I feel like we I feel like we in the investment community should identify that legislator and crowdfund a statue to them in front of like the mayor's office or something like that.
Yeah, or just edify the chief actuary of New York City because they have some authority.
I love the idea of crowdfunding statues of people without their permission. I think that's kind of an interesting concept. What I was going to say, the focus on cash. I've been playing around with this in the last couple of weeks. I think you could create a heuristic for sophistication based on how an organization manages their cash. And I was playing around with my colleague Dane Rook, where we were trying to think through, is there like a ratio of like percentage of assets in alternative assets to percentage of cash? So if I've got 20% of my portfolio in alternative assets, but I'm only sitting on 1% cash, my ratio is 20 of this sophistication. That means I have very smart cash flow models in order to have confidence to do that 20%. Whereas if I've got 20% and then I'm holding 8% in cash, I'm doing that because I don't have faith in the models I'm putting forward in the way that you're describing. I know this is a random topic, but I do think your point of cash is the ultimate focus. And it's shocking to me we don't have more tools, we don't have more, talking about this issue.
Yeah, and it's not only just cash on your balance sheet; it's forecasted cash.
Yeah,
which is really the
unfunded commitments.
So I was a junk bond banker, and the best analysis being done is the FP&A guy for the acquirer or the fund that's making the acquisition. And a good FP&A guy is doing doing a weekly 13-week, cash position roll, updating their model every Monday.
Yeah.
I mean, and we don't have to worry about that because we're never going to run out of cash, right? Because we're funded by the taxpayers. But it's just an indicator that understanding the flows is important to any organization.
For sure.
Right? And you got to watch them.
Well, and it's also like, I think important for, some of our listeners are folks who are, outside the industry and may not necessarily understand like how much of the context you're operating within was like purely inherited, right? Like I very much doubt that you like showed up on your first day of the job. It was like, you know what, guys, 28% leverage. Let's do it. It's going to be great.
No, that wasn't my choice, Sloan.
Yeah. Like, or like, any of these other things, but, within that context, there is this one thing that you can model, which is when the cash comes in and out, which is great.
Yep.
Very vibesy. You mentioned you've been listening to a bunch of Free Money podcast episodes. God bless you.
You're the one.
Are any of them?
You're the one. Wow.
Are any of them like good? Or any of these podcast episodes? Is there ones that you would like recommend other people check out?
So very early, when I discovered this, I listened to the Ben Mang podcast first. And I got to tell you, brilliant man.
Oh, yeah.
You need to price in carbon. It's the way to do it. It's the way, to paraphrase him, if we could price in pollution and solve that problem, why can't we price in carbon and solve that problem? Capitalism, right? So I love Ben. But that triggered me to go back and started listening. And I have to tell you, my favorite episode is misogyny and maple syrup.
Deep cut.
You were a little bit cruel
to
a money manager who sends me mailings once a week. But as a solicitation, I see these solicitations constantly. But I shared that podcast with my trustees and a group of friends of mine that my risk genius buddies. And I'm trying to proselytize. I'm trying to get your story out.
I think was that the one we had the maple syrup stabilization fund in Quebec or something?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's like the greatest sovereign fund of all time.
Very good, very good. My heart is in Vermont, by the way.
Yeah. And they
but
say
Voss of
innovation
Reason
isn't
was
sweet.
very good. I reached out to Jason Voss after that.
Oh yeah.
Brilliant episode. And Practical Implications of Net Zero Pledge from Christy Jenkinson. Another great podcast. And I would have to say that the the comments you had, Ashby, on Lori Chase Davis. I've never met her, but bringing comedy to pensions is a good advice.
Yeah, she's
Good advice.
outstanding.
And then I would make one other comment.
Okay.
One other comment.
We like
I'd like
constructive criticism, especially when it's not criticism. It's positive.
You've actually mentioned Opus Dei twice.
Have we?
Right?
Oh, the chains. Oh, the
Right.
chains.
And
Self-flagellation.
I think you missed an opportunity to talk about the key piece of equipment they use, the Salice.
Mm-hmm.
That's the leg
That's
strap.
it. So
And it was like
the Salice.
I've just watched the Da Vinci Code too many
Yeah, me
times.
too. Well, we'll get that into our Ephanon.
There you go.
Yeah, the nows of Ephanon.
So like, if anyone else is out there, besides obviously checking out the podcast episodes that you talked about, they're like, wow, this whole like cash flow thing and like thinking about who I am and doing something about it thing sounds pretty cool. As someone who's been through this journey, kind of dealt with the practicalities of it, what would you say to somebody in that position who's thinking about, kind of following the same sort of operational alpha path that you've followed in your organization?
Well, it's about what you should focus on, and I've look, I was a professional money manager. I probably wasn't worth the fee I was paid as an active manager of junk bonds. I think we outperformed because the indexes were so poor back then, and I can tell you that the people who manage junk bonds for us can't beat their index. The only reason that they're still hired is that ETFs are approximately the same price. So I think it's boil down what you need to do to a strategic foundation, right? Active manager, you better frickin' be worth what we're paying you. Otherwise, we're going to replace you with the index that replicates you. And we'll be doing more of that this year. We've been doing a lot of it for the last 3 years. We're going to do more. Minimize expenses, and then have a much longer horizon view of this. You're not bond or equity traders. You are long-term asset allocators that if you work for a public system, you should consider as a perpetuity. And I would add finally that your job is to not only protect the members but protect the taxpayers, because the members are guaranteed their benefit and the taxpayers will pick up the bill if you screw it up. So I think that points you towards more macro understanding of the impacts in your portfolio: long-term equity returns, long-term bond returns, long-term alternative returns, where the leverage is. For us, it's both in our alternative basket and just the macroeconomic of how we're structured, because we do have 28% leverage, and where the cash flows are coming from and how to manage towards them. And I would say it should be a lot simpler than most people make it. I mean, I am kind of dumbfounded often by some of the articles I read about our business. Just they don't always make a lot of sense.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
You're not taking a pot shot, are you? No, I'm joking.
No. You're advocating good things, generally speaking, I would argue.
Well,
no, but yeah, there definitely are others who advocate other things.
Yeah. No, but
yes,
Sandy. So first off, and I mean this sincerely, without comedy, thank you for your service. Like you reminding us all that you used to be a high yield credit manager. I don't think we call them junk bonds anymore.
Yeah, we've gentrified junk bonds.
We call them junk bonds. Okay. And now you're bringing this amazing skill set into the public pension plan world. And I wrote a paper in 2012 where we talked about the green, the gray, and the grounded, about the types of people who want to work at pension plans. And we touched on this when you first came on, where you're talking about most of our people are young. And in our experience, we saw young people that want to go and build, a track record of excellence, grounded people who are from a location. Like if you're from Alaska, maybe you want to go work in Juneau. And gray, which is a proxy for later in career. You may not be gray, Sandy, but
I am. why I shave it off.
Yeah, exactly. But the whole point of the Cray is people who have had a career and want to give back and serve the community, and that's what you're doing. And so, just sincerely thank you for doing that and helping to be a role model to other plans.
I was embarrassed into it by my family, who has a large military component.
Oh, that's great.
And so
we'll pull
yeah,
every lever we can. We'll play to the patriotism to get smart people in pension plans.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get a parade for pension fund CIOs going. That's our next project. The free money parade.
The ticker tape parade. Once we get the crowdfunding mechanisms like spun up, we are unstoppable. Canyon of Heroes parade.
I think we could do a Sandy Rich statue.
I wouldn't do that.
All right, Sandy. Thank you so much for coming on the
Thank
Free
you
Money
so much.
Podcast.
Chat to you
a lot of
soon.
fun.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
He's outstanding.
Wow. I mean,
we
every time we
might
do
have
one,
to go easier on those New York plans now. You know what I mean?
well, I feel like we do always try to balance kind of informed understanding of what constrains the organization.
Yeah.
With empathy and activism and advocacy for the people who are actually in the roles trying to drive change.
Yeah.
But we also make a lot of dick and fart jokes, so
It happens. Yep.
But yeah, I feel like that's an interesting example of somebody who controls a massive chunk of equity, who, when you ask him what matters in his life, would answer stuff that a lot of people on the street would have absolutely no idea about, and how they play into the day-to-day decision.
Yeah, it's so funny to me how little attention we actually pay as an industry to cash, and we use diversification as a means of managing cash, whereas actually really smart modeling at the level of cash flow in and cash flow out, all of which we can define pretty tightly for a pension fund. Like we can predict with pretty confident bounds based on final salary, years of service, inflation rates, like what we're going to owe people. And so we should be able to, build a bottom-up model that allows some chief investment officer a top-down view of the cash that you're holding and the cash you need to, spend, and the cash that needs to go to a private equity manager from your unfunded commitments. And it should all be about cash, because eventually we got to take these investments and turn them into cash and give them to somebody. And so
it's really, I mean, it always is that way. It's that way on the if you're trying to understand a company just on the operating level, you follow the freaking cash.
Yeah.
Like you tie the cash flow statement to the other stuff, and then you go, oh wow, that's so cool. Like I wonder what these accounting treatments are all about. But that's how you pull on the string that unfurls the whole thing and shows you what's going on.
And then you look at these companies and you're like, well, what's the operating lever? It's like all about metrics of how well they use their cash. And
cash conversion ratio.
Yeah. And so we kind of need that in pension funds. Like how effective are you at using your cash? Because cash is that free option. When the markets drop, you can invest it. When, all this stuff. So anyway, that was really fun. I was sitting there thinking we need to do another round of allocators like Sandy on the show.
Yes.
Because the insights, like I love all of our guests the same. It's like all of our children. We love them the same.
Yeah.
But it is fun to get back to my roots a little bit and like listen.
Oh, same. Yeah. It's like I think that there's something that there's a coherence that you get from sitting in the operator role and actually trying to integrate all this crap.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
That when we we talked to Dimitri or 2 episodes ago and Mary an episode ago about really, really interesting things that they know just a lot about.
Yeah.
Right. And it's so cool to go deep on that stuff, but then to have the opportunity to actually fit it into a broader picture, and see get a glimpse of how all of those things work in motion is just a very cool thing.
Yeah, it was outstanding.
Yeah, we're gonna have to establish minimum allocator representation quotas.
I think we gotta get a quota. I think it's time
in our free money bylaws. But it's time for hard things. Actually, it's time for what's been hard for you, my friend?
That was my I know you don't have sound effects, so I do sound effects.
Sound effects remain hard
Yes.
for everyone here.
Yes, okay. So I'm waiting. I'm watching you to be like, "Are you going to do a sound effect?" And so I just did it.
Oh yeah.
Hard things. Hard things. This is legit. I feel like I keep getting the question from people. Hey, how do you keep your wife happy with all the like stuff that you're doing? And I was like, should I talk about the fact that I keep getting that question? And I think it reflects on the fact that like I go to Australia and I'm gone, and like my wife is also building a company, a data company, so she's not chilling. And we don't have help with the kiddos, and so there's a juggling fest. We're in a constant juggle, and I was really thinking hard about like how, because I feel like we do have a strong relationship. I joke that like um, you know, we're hanging by a thread is just like that thick floss that's like kind of hard to break. That's my joke, but the reality is, I think what like I try not to keep her happy. I tried to make sure she's not angry, and like I think honestly, if like that is like maybe that's a depressing comment a little bit, but I think that's like a pretty fair way to describe like the hard thing about being an entrepreneur is you end up in this phase where you're like most cherished relationship. You start thinking like, how do I keep my wife not angry at me? I mean, I joke about being in the doghouse a lot, and that I've got carpet and Wi-Fi in the doghouse at this point. But I think
you're like sitting there on your little tablet,
Yeah.
like doing like.
But as a practical thing, what I do, because I am trying to keep my wife not angry at me, is I set little reminders to just go and do chores around the house. Like it'll go like bing, 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 and I'll be like, oh, just go put a load of laundry in. It'll go bing, bing, bing. I'll be like, go look in the dishwasher and see if there's things I need to be doing. Go clean up something. Go check on the kids' homework. I have all these little reminders, which emerged out of trying to make sure my wife wasn't mad at me. But now they've evolved into just best practice,
Operational alpha, baby.
Yeah, and I almost see my wife smiling from time to time now. It's like by not making her angry as like the low bar, maybe I've made her happy. I don't want to go that far.
Yeah,
we'd have to ask her.
I mean, my mental model for like all romantic relationships is like you grow together, you grow apart, right? And like to me, it's most important to have like a trajectory of growth that kind of aligns.
Yeah.
But like it's like in living with a partner and starting a company over the last year, I've been like, wow, holy crap, there is like OPSEC here that I just don't have any like there are not that many like frameworks around it. And like if you Google like, okay, how to manage stress as a founder or whatever, you're like, you get these people who took like $100 million down from Andreessen Horowitz. They were like, yeah, well, I simply hire a nanny to take care of, to make sure the other nanny is like up to date on all the protocols.
Shouldn't you just be leaning in further? Isn't that the answer?
That is
Sorry.
Like,
I went there.
Like, I mean, like Facebook is like literally responsible for genocide, but I think that Lean In is like a comparable level of toxic in terms of what it did to our conception of a reasonable workplace, and like we don't have kids, we only have old cats who like basically need about 15 minutes of care a day.
But it's hard. I mean, my wife is 2 years in to her startup journey. Schoolitics.com. Feel free to check it out. Shout out. This is the Related Parties podcast. And but it is like part of it has been awesome because the two of us can share the pain and like I find us sitting around chatting about like it is almost like we were both rowers at Princeton. So she was a coxswain on the women's team, and we would talk about rowing constantly in the early days. And now we talk about the pain of building companies. It's like we're competing again, And so actually, that's a cool thing. I mean, we joke about how hard startups are, but if you can be on the journey with somebody, even if you're not in the same startup, it's been really fun to go on that journey with her. Anywho.
That's really
What's hard? What's hard for you? I mean, I just took us down a rabbit hole there. Anything hard?
I will say like I think that what's been really hard for me recently is like balancing my excitement with my human need to sleep and eat and see friends and go outside.
Yes.
Like I literally just got my landing page for Invest Vegan to convert really well.
I saw that on the Twitter sphere.
Yeah,
You
it,
tweeted
like
about that.
and yeah, I mean, and I'm so good at marketing that like my approach to this is to be like, I just built the most good converting landing page ever.
Yeah.
Check it out on the internet.
Yeah.
But
did you even put a link? I don't even think you had a link there.
I did put a link there.
Okay.
I did put a link there. And like and what an amazing feeling. Like I tweeted this stupid tweet out, and then instantly someone signs up for my email list right after that, and I can see that happen, trace it, etc. Like, and it's I think underscores to me the depth of what I am unable to know. Like I talk about this with Claire, my partner, a lot because like we sort of think about like investing is a very, very strange thing to be doing and explaining to somebody who is like a software engineer and thinks that the world is ordered and logical. And like I don't know, like to I took a trial of a $25,000 a month research service over the month, over a couple of weeks in August, and like started reading all of these like super high end whatevers, and immediately got a sense of the depth of what I am unable to get access to until I'm able to pay for that stuff.
Right.
And so like I think that like the central philosophical question for me as a human being has been like, how do I deal with things that I cannot possibly know, and how do I find a way to make do with old information, and in a way that's actually like additive to the strength of a long-term strategy, because like you don't actually need to react to new information all that often if you're good enough at processing old information.
It's a profound point that I think you're making, which is like in the journey of building something from scratch, inevitably you begin to realize that you're reaching your maximums, and it's okay. I also have had that. I don't want to make this all about me, but I will tell you, I have had this realization through the process of hiring a few people at Adipar, and I won't embarrass them, but they are so much smarter than me in certain domains. Like I remember my PhD supervisor, Gordon Clark, would say, don't look to me to solve all the problems in your doctorate. Like the point of the doctorate is you're the smartest person on earth in this domain. And I feel like that now as their boss. I have these 4 direct reports, each of them, and I'm lucky to be at a company that compensates well and does, it's an exciting place to be. Maybe more exciting even than Stanford, where I've had a lot of employees over the years. And I'm like, the process of getting access to this talent is revealing to me like how amazing talent is to accelerate your goals. Like your realization with great research is like my realization with great people. It's like, wow.
Yep.
You get the right people in the mix. I've got 4 of them. Those 4 are like better than me in areas, and I can then focus on what I want to focus on. And so together we're just, we're going to achieve our goals. I'm very confident now, and it has nothing to do with me. I mean, maybe I was like good at selling them on the mission, but I see that as very similar to what you just described, which is like the limitations of the founder and the realization that if you just had resources, you could really do a lot more.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, oh, great, another balancing act, just what I needed. Anyway, guess what it's time for? It's a sound effect. Yes! It's our lone sound effect.
Oh. You know what we could take as well, first of all, listeners, give us 5 to 6 stars. If you're on a platform that offers 6, do 6. If the max is 5, do 5. And
pay for the podcast premium plan.
What if we welcome, if our website's working, what if we welcome people to suggest jingles to the different segments? Because the segments are known at this point. We've got the opening, we've got the news, we've got the guest, we've got the hard things, we've got the Dear Ashby's. We already have a jingle. We've got the garden, and then we got the bye, which also has its own that also has a jammy jam at the end. But there's some missing jingles out there, listeners.
Yeah. We'll set it. Well, you know what? I am here. I'll commit at this time that if you submit a jingle that is used on the show, we will mint you
an NFT,
AI created free money NFT. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, what if everybody who submits a jingle, we try it out? Like if it's unless it's crude or so, we won't try.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Do you know what I mean? And then like 22 episodes from now, we'll solidify the jingle, the jingle structure of the show.
I love this idea. It's.
I like to outsource work.
Yeah.
We could spend a lot of time thinking about jingles, but instead, let's turn to you, dear listener. Do you have a good jingle that makes us think of gardening?
Yep, that makes us think of or anything. I mean, do you just have like a sweet song that you want to suggest for a certain thing? I don't know. That you want to put on our soundboard? Let's do it. First, dear Ashby, question of the week.
Let's do it.
What's the sickest? And I believe that this is skateboarder lingo, where sick means good.
I'm from California. I can confirm that means good.
Yeah. 3,000 miles on this side of the country, it's a little hard to see. What's the sickest financial model that you've ever heard of / seen? I'm so excited for your answer to this.
I have two, because in one part I defined it as an Excel spreadsheet, and then the other I actually just thought of like a model. Because so much of the stuff we see that is like new and sick is bespoke, and to be tailored like that, generally it winds up being in a spreadsheet. But in 2018, I saw a cash flow model that was the most complex thing I had ever seen. And this is so funny that we talked about this. I literally wrote this down, the cash flow model for a pension fund in Australia, as the sickest model I'd ever seen, even before the show. Like, people are going to think this was planned. Please, if you're, a new listener, you should know it's not planned.
Yeah, we're not organized, just consistent.
I think I've actually mentioned this model on the show a few times as being sick, because you could in 2019, you would hit F9 and it would take 20 minutes to recalculate. Like, that's how much processing was going into it. It was capturing all the cash flows in and out of the entire organization. And so that was sick in the positive way, but it was also partly why we then went and built RCI to capture all that data in software, because we still found errors. It may have been the sickest thing, but like spreadsheets aren't professional grade software. So that was the most complex, wild thing. And it was a cash flow model. So to give you a sense for like how hard it is what Sandy's doing. In terms of elegance, that's my second one. The future-proof model that I didn't actually write, but I helped to start the company, that downscales climate models to a specific building location, incorporates building materials from that the construction of that building, and can spit out projections of damages related to climate change to a specific address and a specific building type. I think that is the most elegant thing, because it's one of the first examples of putting a true price, a damage projection on climate change. And so if you can actually show people what it will cost to hold this building long term, now you don't get to like do the ESG is woke argument. You have to be like, oh wait, so insurance companies are going to change my premiums because of this? It's like, that's coming. That's the coolest shit I've ever seen.
Yeah, I just saw actually news that an insurer pulled out of Florida.
All of them. They like all the property and casualty insurers are bailing. It's all going back to what's called the Florida Citizens, where like the state pooled insurance policies so that people can live there. That's how they get insurance. None of the professional commercial insurers are rushing into Florida right now because of the hurricane risk.
Sick. Well, that's not terrifying at all. What bad pitch do allocators go absolutely gaga for?
Great question, listener. This is my favorite question of the day. Most favored nation clauses. Most favored nation clauses are used by limited partners to, in theory, make sure that they are getting the best deal that the manager is providing anybody themselves. And so the pension funds often see this as like, yes, I maximized my negotiation. I got the maximum value extracted from this manager. And so you will see these MFNs floating around quite a bit. What people don't realize on the pension side is the consequence of these MFNs is they are a floor.
Yep.
The managers will never go beneath the MFN because they say things like, well, if I do this for you, I have to do this for everybody. And so it becomes this base upon which ratchets go up, but not down. And by the way is something I say apparently. By the way, if you are a $1 trillion fund and you show up at that manager and you say, I'm not going to pay this thing, this is too high, the manager will say, let's just create a little SMA over here. Let's just create a slightly different product that we define as it's USA minus Hawaii. And so now we have a new mandate with a new fee structure, and we'll give you whatever we want. We just can't invest in Hawaii. It's like, wait, yeah, that happens. That's real. I don't know if the Hawaii example is real, but that's kind of like the kind of stuff you see as like little carve outs to create different fee structures. And the MFN is then used to like keep the fees up.
There's like a stereotype about finance as being an industry where people like email PDFs to each other at great cost and complexity. And like, I feel like the MFN more than any other like attribute is like the asset management side of that. On the investment banking side, it's like making PowerPoint presentations that no one ever reads or whatever.
Yep.
But on the investment management side, it's like, where's my fee? Where's my agreement? Like, you know.
Is that what they sound like?
Yeah.
Your
Why do we need sound effects?
Your impressions are astounding.
If you're gonna send in a sound effect, by the way, and you want to just record yourself making a sound, that counts too.
Yeah, we will put that on the show. You could just literally say your name out loud, and we'll be like, that would be the greatest segue.
All right, so this is like a very like, okay, someone had their coffee this morning. What's the practical impact of electricity price spikes, and how do you think the realized volatility in prices paid has changed over the last 5 to 10 years?
This is almost too hard. This is almost too hard, Sloan. I was like, huh? All right. Practical impact of price spikes. So look, price of electricity and energy is a function of weather. It is. If you have a cold winter, you'll see prices go up. It is a function of the economy. If everybody is buying the gasoline or seeking to pull the power out of the grid into their hot tub that they just installed, and it will go up. And also supply. And so those are the three variables that everybody needs to think anytime you're thinking of the price of any kind of energy. What's the weather, which is like going to have an effect on consumption? What's the economy, which is going to have an effect on consumption? And what's the supply, which I think is going to have an effect on supply.
Yep.
So now the practical impacts. Well, there's the inflationary effects. There's the personal budget effects. Part of what's been really interesting with the rise and fall of gas prices is everybody has felt that pain. To understand that it really does affect personal budgets. You know, you were spending X and now you're spending Y. Interestingly, in terms of like the price volatility changing, I think it's been dampened. I think that's a word. Dampened?
That's one of the science words, kind of like
volatility. Yeah. Dampener. Because we do a lot of stabilization as a society today, either through quite literal stabilization funds, like our maple syrup stabilization fund, which is stabilizing the flow of maple syrup so that one variable, the supply variable, is consistent. Even if you can't contain people's hunger for syrup, you can control the supply. And so the stabilization fund has been a kind of bellwether of resource-rich economies around the world and have been set up at an increasing pace over the last 15 years. So as those prices move wildly in other parts of the world, some of the governments are able to manage that price volatility. This is a long-winded way of saying I'm not sure,
A lot of stuff.
but I
stuff
got
happening.
some feedback, okay, that I'm sharing with you. I don't know exactly what the question was hoping for, but that's my interpretation.
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess, like, they're wondering, like, I interpreted it to be like, okay, so there's like a median and there's a mode of the energy price, and so presumably if it's spiking all the time, like, you're gonna have a situation where the mode is like higher than the median, and so
That's
you
right.
have this like, kind of, weird situation where like maybe you have this one dramatic thing that happened during a snowstorm and all of a sudden things look a lot worse than they are, perhaps. So maybe they were asking about our perception. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. The price spikes, I think, do have a political consequence.
Yeah.
They are an opportunity to win points. Look at the price of gas, or look at my electricity bill. These are painful moments for a politician that, for some reason, people want to live in a free economy with deregulated energy markets, which we did. And yet we also want our gas prices to stay low. And it's kind of hard to do it all.
Yeah. I also love that how big babies Americans are about this. Like, our gas prices are like half.
Oh my God. I lived in Europe for a decade.
Yeah.
It's like you understand why they all have tiny little cars over there, because it's like 5 times as expensive. Maybe not that much, but something like that.
What do you got for us in the garden tips department? I got a pretty good one.
So, if you recall, I am going to the beach. So I was trying to figure out how to keep just a couple of my plants, because I have mostly succulents, but I have a couple plants that I water almost on the daily. And they're not that healthy right now because I was off in Australia and nobody took care of them. And so I'm nervous about them getting another 5 days without any water. And I was gazoogling, what are some strategies? And I got a great tip. The bathtub. You put a little bit, you don't want to scratch up your bathtub, so you put a towel down, but then you fill the bathtub up, 2-3 inches, like you do with that little dish around your plant, and you put your like thirsty plants in the tub. It's much wider, and the water will just get pulled in by the plants as they need it through those little holes in the soil. And so that's what I'm going to do. Now, the tip is a kind of pre-tip because I haven't done it yet, but I think that will be a great way to keep these plants fully watered while I'm gone.
That'll work pretty well. If you, especially, a lot of plants, or most plants, especially if they have good drainage or whatever, through capillary action, if you just sort of like bottom water them, where you put them in a big puddle of water, they'll just like, kind of organically suck up the amount of water that they need to survive.
That's this idea. Yes. Yeah, that's the idea I just said. But you said it so much better than me. Something about capillaries and organics or something. I don't know.
I got to listen to you talk about it and be like, oh, okay, what are the science words for that? This is kind of like a long-termism tip. I mean, like, I feel like, every 5th gardening tip, I'm basically like, everyone, remember, if you garden, you're basically a dirt farmer.
That's right.
Take care of your dirt. I think that one of the things that can be really forbidding is like, what's my time that I can like, start making headway on my gardening project, right? Like, a lot of people are just like living in a house. They want to do something in the backyard. They don't know what to do or whatever. Now is a time when you can start thinking about planting cover crops for stuff that you want to do things to. It's like the right way to do it is going to vary tremendously based on your geography. But like, let's say hypothetically, you wanted to create a new garden bed. There are a number of plants that you can grow from, sort of grow now, start in September, that they'll sort of grow up over the winter. They'll keep, microbial life in the soil over the winter and serve as a habitat for insects. And then, you can literally take your lawnmower over them and they will turn into like future compost for your garden friends.
No kidding.
Yeah. So
Do you have an example of what seeds should I be buying?
what
or
seed
like,
should you be buying? Well, so like I think peas, like legumes,
Okay.
basically are notorious nitrogen fixers. Lentils, but clover works really well. The real question is like, what are you trying to accomplish, right? Because like
Yeah.
for me up on my roof, I'm mostly worried about protecting the soil. So I
Mhm.
want to get like a pretty like kind of bushy and thick thing that can basically freeze over the winter and keep my little earthworm friends alive. But it's not rocket science. You can literally Google cover crops and you'll find like 7 different varieties.
So I can search it on the internet.
Yeah. And the thing about being a cover crop is like by definition, a cover crop is something that you grow to plow under and like turn into compost, right? So it's never a very expensive seed.
That is actually a tip in its own. Just knowing what a cover crop is.
Yeah.
It's something
yeah.
that you eventually will plow to become fertilizer for the thing you're going to grow.
Yep.
So we
yep.
got to grow something to be able to grow something.
Exactly. Well, yeah. I mean, like it's the only way that you get around that is by using nitrogen-based fertilizers, which come from guess what? Oil. So
Yep.
like the cover crop thing is here to stay. It'll be here for a while, and boy, do you have a great opportunity to learn about it firsthand if you're trying to do stuff in your garden.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna go and get my cover crop organized because this
Cover
is the
your
time
crops,
of the year.
baby.
Yep.
All right.
All
well,
right.
Everyone else, bye.
I'm looking like money, 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 money. Now make it rain on 'em.